Hello, this is Women with Developmental Disabilities, and I would like to welcome everybody to today's webinar, CustomizedEmployment101. This is our third webinar on a webinar series, and I'd like to do just a few housekeeping items. If participants are muted, upon entry, however, it is suggested that you mute your line as well. If you're using a headset with your computer and you have sound, you may need to check your connection to the audio source. As default, maybe set something different than your headset. The information that is being reviewed today was included within your registration material, and we have questions about homework assignments. Those assignments really do not need to be submitted. We just ask individuals to review the resources so they have a greater context of understanding and going through the webinar. You have the ability to control viewing of the documents with the navigation tool on the top right-hand side of your screen. If you do have technical issues, please post those in the chat box. For question and answers related to the content, please post those in the Q&A section. If you need services, at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to open the multimedia viewer to find the captioning. And with that, we'll turn it over to Janet for continuing. And I will turn it over to Janet. Jen, we are not hearing you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Webinar 3, which is the third one in the 5-part series. As we get started today, I just thought I would do a very quick review. On Webinar 1, remember we talked about, it was an overview of customized employment. And in Webinar, we talked about some definitions of customized employment that really focused on the win-win nature of customized employment, because it's meant to very much fit the individual, the job seeker, in terms of their interests and skills, but also really benefit the employer by meeting one or more of their identified needs. And customized employment, too, always involves some negotiation around job duties. Also in Webinar 1 talked about 4 potential outcomes of customized employment. 2 as being wage employment outcomes, being negotiated jobs or possibly resource ownership. And we also talked about 2 self-employment outcomes, microenterprise or business within a business. Webinar number 2, last week, we had to talk about discovery, or the first step in customized employment, which is really about getting to know people and getting to know about their interests and their skills and the contributions they could bring to the workplace and ideal conditions of employment. So discovery is meant to ask her the question, who is this person? The tools that we use in discovery really come from qualitative research, things like observation and interviews with people who know that person well, rather than more point-in-time data that like with testing or how somebody does on a particular day. Let's go to the first polling question. It's kind of a hard one, but what is to just, as the poll comes up, to look and say which of these are really more indicative of customized employment. They all be great strategies, but which one is the most hit you in the head in terms of customized employment? And I'll give you a hint. There's two that I would say. So doing that, I'm just gonna keep talking a bit. Well, let me give you two. What the questions are is completing an interest inventory, interview who know the job seeker well, participate in activities with the job seeker that discern their skills and interests, having experience by rotating through pre-established work sites, and developing a resume. So while I'm polling questions, I'm going to just keep talking a little bit about where we're going today. So, this is Discovery Part 2. So we're going to complete discovery by talking about how to set up and conduct informational interviews. And part of the purpose of that is to get at called vocational themes or broad areas that sort of indicate people's interests and their skills and can help us with guide job development. We're also going to be talking about summarizing information gleaned in discovery into a short narrative so that you're taking the information that you learned and summarizing it in a way that's useful for job development. And then how do we take that information and put it into a career plan? So just to review again to last webinar, the steps we talked about last time were the home neighborhood observation, which is a meeting that occurs in the individual's home typically, and together people who know that person well to have a conversation, using smooth listening and really making people feel comfortable about talking and sharing information that is tend to get at skills, interests, people's social connections, and the conditions of employment. We talked about a second step of interviewing others, maybe people that couldn't be at the home visit but would have important information, people like maybe, say, siblings that live away from home or other family members, former teachers, former employers, people like that. Also about skills, discovery activities, or that skills and ecological fit, or how you might start getting people out in the community and seeing the tasks that they can do and the skills that they have and learning about how they learn. And that happens both in familiar environments and unfamiliar environments. So webinar, we really covered these first three steps in discovery. And what I want to focus on today is these last three steps, the informational interviews, reviewing records, and developing that descriptive narrative of the ideal conditions of employment. So let's to the polling for a second. There are probably great strategies to use, but the ones that are most of a customized employment, and it's just as you've noted here, are B and C, that interviewing people and participating in activities with people. Those are, again, kind of the more qualitative research kinds of things, interviewing and participating and getting to know people over time or through talking to people who know them well. Interest inventories, they might be helpful, but what we find in customized employment is people are generally aware of their interests, or we're kind of pulling out those interests in different ways by looking at their hobbies, by talking to people. And if those other tools are helpful, it's fine to them. It's just not probably what we call customized employment. Having a job seeker gain experience by rotating through pre-established work sites, again, it might not be a bad strategy, but typically with customized employment, what we're looking at is starting with some interest that the individual has. So I know this happens a lot in schools, typically because you're working with people that maybe don't have a lot of experience, and just logistically, having some pre-established work sites is get people out and doing stuff and learning about their interests. A customized approach, if people are articulate interests in some way, or we know that they have an interest, we're starting with some pre-established sites that may not have anything to do with their interests. We might be starting where they are. So say you have pre-established sites that are doing tutorial work and manufacturing work and maybe working with children, let's say. But this particular person is really, really interested in horticulture. We'll start there with them. On a resume, again, customized employment is often people who don't compete well. And what resumes do is help people compete. So we'll talk about this more in a future session, but often what we do is something that's a little bit of an alternative to a resume that highlights some of their skills and competence without being that more traditional resume. However, I will say if you've got people that do have work experience and do have a good resume, by all means, go ahead and do that. But the purposes of this, B and C are the ones that are really most indicative of customized employment. So let's go to informational interviews. And again, this is one of the steps in discovery. And for earlier steps that you've completed, the home visit, interviewing others, discovery activities, you've already started learning about the person's interest, and potential things are beginning to emerge. You might be understanding that, well, this person's really interested in plants, or this person really likes animals, or they're really mechanical, or things like that. So the goal at this stage is to really kind of help verify those themes, learning more about the industry. Because sometimes as employment specialists, we don't really know very much about the things that somebody else is interested in. Provides an opportunity for both the employment specialist and the job seeker to go out and interact with people who have similar interests in similar vocational themes. When I say themes, I'm talking about just sort of big, broad areas. They're not job descriptions, rather they're broad areas that will lead us to thinking about lots and lots of potential jobs. We like to encourage people to try to get 3 minimally, so we're not looking for the dream job. The dream job is very narrow. It usually means there's one job, and for those who have done job development, it can be frustrating sometimes if you have people really stuck on just one particular job that if it work out, you don't really have anywhere to go. On the flip side of that, I hate it when people say, I'll do anything, because that doesn't give me any direction either. It's just all over the board. We appreciate that they're willing to try anything, but it doesn't really help narrow the job search at all. So we're trying to get at 3 different areas that can give some guidance and some areas to explore, but not just focusing on one particular job or on particular job descriptions. So, for example, if somebody really has an interest, let's say, in trucks, the vocational theme might be blown up to transportation. Because if somebody likes trucks and has skills to work on trucks and likes that kind of environment, maybe work on motorcycles or cars or trains or other things, are kind of fall within that same skill set. Similarly, somebody really likes knitting, I might blow that vocational theme up to maybe like crafts or textiles. Or somebody has a particular interest in tattoos. It may be a little hard to define the theme sometimes. Maybe it's because they're interested in art, in the artwork. Maybe it has to do more with alternate lifestyle. So sometimes the themes aren't real clear, and we need to get out and explore them a little bit to help find what those themes are. Practice, and I'm thinking maybe people, let's try, if you type your answers in the Q&A box. Let's try that, okay? If I were to say, I'm working with somebody who's interested in picking up litter, what would a vocational theme be? I'm going to pause for and let your Q&A box. Animal sanitary, cleaning, housekeeping, yeah, environmental interest, being outdoors, yeah, okay, you got, yeah. I would kind of, and this was actually somebody I worked with, and based on what I knew about this person, it really was kind of, I thought it more of an environmental kind of theme. So let's do it again. What about baseball caps? Somebody's totally into baseball caps. What would be a broader theme? Okay, sports. Good, you guys are good. Sport apparel, good. Sportswear, yeah. Fashion, sports, clothing, retail, exactly. So rather than just focusing on the baseball caps, if we can blow up to like sportswear, athletic apparel, that gives a lot more potential jobs that might fall on there. Similar, like kittens could be blown up to animals. Here's a one. Let's try this one. Civil War memorabilia. What kind of thing might that be? That's a different one. Okay, saying history. Yeah, history, state parks, museums. So history might be the bigger theme, but then you start thinking about, well, where do people with those kind of themes work? Well, they work at museums. They might be collectors. They might, that all that kind of stuff. So again, some of them are a little harder to come by. What would you scrapbooking? What the theme might be there? Crafts. You see crafts, right? Yeah, that would be my thinking was crafts. But then I think, sometimes when you start playing with people with this and doing some discovery activities, here I saw genealogy. It might be really the history part that's kind of interesting to them, or the genealogy part. So craft seems like the obvious answer. When you start discovery activities and informational interviews, you might find that it's really something more specific, that particular activity that leads you to kind of a different theme. And you'll get the idea through here. Crochet might be crafts. Collecting, I think, is a really hard one. I don't know. I'd say maybe outdoors or something like that. Fishing might also be outdoors. But again, the more you participate with people in those activities, the more you'll kind of see what it looks like. Polling question number 2. Here's some clues that we've learned about them. Interested in chopping and stacking wood, love maintaining their wood pile at their house, they like being outside, and they're skilled at various lawn tasks like mowing the lawn and things like that. So what do you think the theme might be? A, sports, B, doors, C, carpentry, D, woodcutter. And again, we're looking for larger themes, not a job description, but larger themes that might include many job descriptions. And while we've got an example, polling question 3, which is also pulled up. We've learned to pull these up together so that we don't have to pause so long in between. So clues for this person are that they're outgoing, they're social, they're the life of the party, they enjoy cooking and getting compliments on their cooking. She loves holidays. In her free time, she enjoys movies and People magazine. And what would the theme be here? A, entertainment, B, planner, C, or D, customer service? And while doing the polls, I'm going to move on. So, that's the answer. So, informational interviews. It's something that allows the job seeker and employment specialist to gain information both about the business, that particular business, but also about the broader industry that the person might be interested in. And the main purposes for doing informational interviews are, first of all, to seek advice from the people who like own or manage those businesses who have similar themes, right? The reason they're in that business is because they like that stuff too. It's also to start to identify some business needs and to connect job seekers to people with those similar interests, both to learn and to potentially get them involved in things where they can, and their social connections. But during discovery, the primary purpose is on advice. Now, I'll do this up front. When we get into the job development stage, we tend to continue using informational interviews as a strategy for job development. During discovery, in that phase, when you're in job development, you may be primarily looking for needs. But in the stage of the game, in discovery, when you're still kind of figuring out what works for a person, you're really mostly, in this case, seeking advice from the person that you're doing the interviews with. So keep that in mind. I think that might come up on the post-test. So during discovery, informational interviews are primarily about seeking advice. I see over here in the polling questions, we've got polling question number 2. Most of you said outdoors, and I would agree that outdoors is kind of the broader theme. Woodworker might be more of a job description, and while we can understand it's probably a job that the person might enjoy very much, by sticking to outdoors as the broader theme, we might come up with lots more possibilities that might work for that person. See carpentry kind of in the same manner. It's maybe something that they would enjoy doing because it's working with wood and that sort of thing. But in carpentry, it might be more of a job description, where outdoors is kind of captures that broader theme. And I know some people have an answer. I think some people are joining by phone as well. So let's go on with informational interviews. When I informational interview, I like some questions prepared first. But again, you want to keep it very conversational. So while I prepare questions, I also, leave it. Oh, I'm sorry, going around because I can see now that also the polling question number 3 is complete too. So we had most people. Let's go back to that a second. This is the guy who's very social and likes cooking, entertaining, and party and people and those kinds of things. Most of you said entertainment, and I would agree that entertainment is the broad theme. Party planner might be more of a job description. Again, probably be a job that she'd enjoy very much based on what we know about her. She probably would be good in customer service. But again, we're looking for that broader theme. So entertainment's probably the one that I would have picked too. So as we go into the informational interviews, I tend to think about questions in 3 different categories. The first just being openers, just trying to get the conversation going. The second kind of group of questions I think about are questions that get at advice. During this story, primarily what we want is advice. And the third kind of group of questions get at needs, employer needs, because again, we want to be matching people to jobs that fit employers' needs as well. So for opening questions, I ask questions like this. Tell me how you got started in this line of work. And I really like that question because it kind of makes people think to how they entered the field, into entry level positions and what kinds of things they thought about, what kinds of training or experience they needed. Or you might just ask questions, generically about the business. What does your business do? What kinds of products and services do you make? And even if you know what they do, you want them to tell you. You want to hear from them, and you want the job seeker to hear it from them. So again, during the informational interviews, the job seeker is with you and to go through these questions together. So hopefully, as much as they're able to, are asking some of these questions themselves. But you can ask questions. You might also ask questions like, what does a typical day look like? We're kind of getting at sort of core and episodic routines that happen in the business. This means a total list of questions, but they're just some samples to give you an idea. So opening questions are just kind of to get people talking and loosened up. Questions, as I said, really gets more at advice. And so I think that first question I said is, tell me about how you got started in this field. It really does kind of get at advice as well as being a good opener. But you ask people about, different positions that happen within the business, maybe look for in potential employees. I actually love that question because sometimes later, if I go back with a proposal for the employee, that question really kind of gets at who looking for, and I can use that to build into the proposal. What training requirements people have. This is always this is a quick question even to wrap up the interview is what would you recommend to George here who's interested in this field? Where would you recommend he start? So that's just a really good question to go back on. And then some of the questions get business needs. And they don't have to be in this order. You can certainly mix them up. The questions that might get at needs might be things like what trends in your field. And people in the medical field, maybe, electronic medical records is something that's been, not new, but, kind of changing the way people do business. And sometimes that creates new needs for people. There are things that customers ask for or complain about that the business can't provide. Maybe the business can't work with customers that have like for instance, I worked with somebody on developing a small doing lawn mowing. And initially, we thought that the larger lawn care company in this community would be a competitor, and that it might be very hard for this young man to get customers because a lot of people use them. But when we talked to them, they actually said, they didn't really like doing the very small, homeowner jobs. They liked the big contracts. They were actually very happy to refer those smaller contracts to him. So sometimes that's the kind of thing you're looking for. This third interesting one, if you had $10,000 to invest in your business, what would you do with it? And all kinds of interesting responses to this one. Because if you ask this question to a very large business, they probably wouldn't really care. It's like $10,000 is probably a drop in the bucket to them, and they probably don't need it. But ask this question to a small business owner, it's really interesting what comes up. A couple of years ago, I was doing a training for employment specialists in Kansas, and we were in a very, very small community in Kansas. And I had sent people out to do some informational interviews and then they were going to come back and report. So while they were out, I went to this small bakery to have lunch, and I to the business owners, and they were asking about what I was doing in town, and I was explaining what we were doing, and that people were out doing informational interviews with different businesses. And I was kind of saying, like we're trying to get at what these businesses have. And the man shot his hand up. He was like an excited student going, "Oh, pick me. I want to answer that question." I said, "Well, yeah, that's great. What would you do? What would you do if you had money to invest in your business, or what are needs that you have?" And he identified like three things. One was if they had a bakery, he and his wife were there from 2 a.m. till about afternoon. He said the place is empty after that. He said, "I would love to see somebody come in and use my oven to make pizza or something in the evenings. It'd be some income to him, but it would also give the one awful pizza place in town a run for their money." The thing he said is, I would love it if we had somebody who could deliver our bread to surrounding communities. He said, "It's something we've been wanting to do. It would increase our business. We just haven't had time to do it." The third thing he said is there was a small college in that small town. He could have a little cart and maybe get somebody out there selling our bread pastries in the morning before the college food service starts. That would just expand our business, give us more exposures. So people have all kinds of interesting responses to that question. And you might be thinking, yeah, but where does that $10,000 come from? Well, we're not going to really cover it in this one, but in the Social Security session that's coming up, we're going to talk a lot about PASS plans. That's a pretty typical amount for a PASS plan. So there are ways that people could come up with that to really make those kinds of things happen. Another thing is if you had an additional employee 10 hours a week, or 20 hours a week, or whatever you want to put in there, what have them do? I'm working with a woman with a mental health disability who had said she wanted to work about 10 hours a week. She wanted to work every day, but for a short period every day. She was very interested in working with elderly people, and she also liked crafts, and in particular had an interest in putting together gift baskets. So that's the information we were starting with. We went out and talked to an assisted living place in her community, one of the that we asked them was this question: if you had an additional employee 10 hours a week, what would you have them do? And the woman looks at me and she said, "That's so funny you asked that." She said, "The other day, we were saying, wouldn't it be nice if we had somebody here like between 4 and 6 every day when people are coming back from activities and we're getting ready for dinner? It's just kind of a busy time. But she could want to work 2 hours a day." And he's lighting up, going, "Wow, this is the perfect schedule for this person." And we're talking to her. I'm looking above her head, and on the file cabinets, there's a whole bunch of gift baskets lined up. So apparently, when we'll move into the assisted living facility, they give the gift baskets as a welcome present. So just a way we could start seeing different needs that they had that we could piece together for a job for her. So those are the kinds of questions that we ask at informational interviews. Now, the informational interviews is always something that needs some preparation for. First of all, you're basing who you contact person's emerging themes. So, like for instance, in that example I just gave, the woman was interested in working with elderly people, was what took us to the assisted living place. So had an interest in crafts. That's not necessarily why we went to the assisted living place, but it really did have some needs there around that too. Using personal connections, if it's a little more of a warm call, if you can approach the person that you're trying to do the interview with, if you know them, if you can say, "So and so recommended I call you," or it's just easy to get people to talk and loosen up, because if you say, "So and so recommended I call you," they're less likely to say, "Oh, I can't talk, I'm too busy to do that," those sorts of things. The others really stress the reason why I'm contacting them in particular. I'm working with somebody who, helping them with career planning, but that they're interested in the same area as this person's business. They really are interested in working with elderly people. That's why I'm coming to you, because that helps connect it too. And think if somebody called you and said, "I'm working with someone who's really interested in working in the field of disabilities, and we're just trying to gather some information to help them with a career plan. Would you be willing to meet with us for 15 minutes? I mean, probably most of us would say yes to that. That's, it's a pretty low commitment. Let's say I like to talk about what we do, or most people do, and to keep the request fairly short, for a short time, most people would be willing to do that. Oops, there we go. Okay, question number 4. Setting up informational interviews, you want to stress to business owners that you're contacting them because A, they have a job opening that you think the client might be a good fit for. Your client shows interest and or skills that relate to that company's mission and activities. You had a recommendation from someone who knows the employer, or D, the company has a lot of turnover and you can ensure them that your client will stay with them for a long time if hired. So what do you think is the best answer to that question? And while you're answering, I'm going to keep moving on. Here's a sample. People differently. I generally call a business and make an appointment for the informational interview. Part because my mother always taught me that it's polite to call people before just dropping in on them. I think it is respectful of the business. It also sure that the right person's there. Sometimes if you just drop in, it's an employee and it's not really the owner or the manager who you really want to talk to. So by coming ahead, you help set it up for success. Now, I certainly have dropped in on people too. So you have to be a little flexible with things. But typically, I would call ahead and then say something like this: "Hi, my name is Janet Stingley, and I'm with Griffin Hammis Associates. And from the Chamber of Commerce greeters recommended that I contact you." So I'm name dropping here a career counselor working with a young woman named Nikki who has strong interest in baking. We're doing some, or whatever the interest is. In this case, we're approaching a bakery, so I emphasize the baking. We're opportunities for Nikki to talk to local business owners to help her establish a career plan. Would you like to spend about 20 minutes with Nikki and I sometime next week at your convenience? Nikki will be asking you some questions about your business, and your advice on how to get started in this field. I'd keep the time frame pretty short. I think 15 or 20 minutes is pretty good. I'll tell you, oftentimes when I ask for a 20-minute informational interview, it will go for an hour. Often, almost always, it will go for an hour. So you need to plan that. You don't want to be rushing out of an informational interview when somebody's scheduled the time to take, to sit and talk with you. But people do talk about their businesses, and assuming that you schedule it at a time when they're not super busy, let it go in for, I really even schedule an hour and a half so that you're knocking out. Now, if I said 20 minutes, 8 minutes is going by and the person's still talking, I might do a little time check with them and say, this is really interesting, this is great information, I just check, are you okay? Because I have 20 minutes. And if they're okay, fine to keep going. If okay, it gives them a little break to say, yeah, I really need to get back to what I'm doing. Maybe pause for a minute. Let me just go back. Let's see if there's any questions. Go back. I don't know if it can come up because polling going. Okay, questions in a minute then. So interview. Okay. So question number 4. You both got it. That yes, the client shows interest and or skills that relate to that company's mission. You want to stress as you're setting up those informational interviews that you're going out and talking to everybody. You're to get specific information that relates to what person wants to do. And again, this was kind of confusing because if you have option or somebody you can name drop, that's even better. But where you're going is really related to what that person is doing in terms of vocational themes or interest. So super. Thanks, you guys. So as I go into the interview then, I like to have questions prepared and to review them with the job seeker and to help them develop questions. So oftentimes when I go out and do technical assistance with folks on information interviews, what I find they're saying, well, I'm just meeting the job seeker at interview and no preparation done with them ahead of time. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that the job seeker understands the purpose of the informational interview. That's not, you don't want to use that word actually, because sometimes when you say interview, people think of a more traditional interview where the employer is interviewing them, and this is totally different because you're interviewing the employer. You go over some questions with the individual, as much as possible if they can help in asking those questions and directly with the employer, that's great. Using listening, again, we talked about this in the home visit, but we also really want to listen during the informational interviews. We want to ask enough to get people talking, using very open-ended questions so that we're listening most of the time. We don't want to be in there telling them what they do. We want to hear from them what they do. Even if you kind of know, even if you've done some research and know about their business, the purpose of this is to hear it from them. We try to get people to do some sit-down time, like sit down for 15 or 20 minutes and talk, and it is nice to have a tour, but we try to sit down and talk first and do the tour at the end. That way you make sure you get your sit-down time. Sometimes if you do the tour first, when it's over, people just think that's the end and you never get that time. But the tour important too, because sometimes people don't think to tell you about certain things. And things that you see and observe that are really important. Like, I'll give you an example. An employment specialist I was working with a couple years ago was doing an informational interview with a CPA, by public accountant. And she was working with somebody who could do kind of office type work. And the CPA couldn't really identify any needs, even with some probing. But what the employment specialist saw was all these shoe boxes stacked up in her office. She asked her about it. What are those shoe boxes? Now, the shoe boxes were filled with people's receipts, turning in to their, for tax purposes. And they were a mess. They were just a box full of receipts that weren't organized in any order. Long story short, ended up creating a job for Patty around just organizing those people's receipts and circling dates and circling the amounts and putting them in some order. That really, really helped the account when it came time for her to do what she needed to do with them. She didn't identify that as a need until the employment specialist saw the boxes and asked about them. And then once she got asking about them, then she started thinking about other needs. Well, hey, when I'm busy, it would be really nice if somebody else did the bank runs or somebody else went to the mail, to the post office to get the mail. So I created a whole job for her based on some other needs. During I usually like to end with some kind of question or statement that lets you have an opening for some time in the future. Like, would you be willing to be a resource for us in the future? Or if we have additional questions, could we get back to you? Or I know you said that, this other business might be good for us to talk to. Would it be okay if we tell what you sent us? So you're just sort of leaving it with ending to contact them again. And then at the end of the interview, I always like to send a thank you. I think it's nice. I think people need to know that you appreciate the time that they spent with them. So get yourself a big stack of thank you cards and just have them in your office and be ready to send one out quick. I'm for a minute and see if there's questions in the chat.
We have two questions in the
Q&A.
Q section, and on the first question, I'll do a little interpretation. VC would be Vocational Rehabilitation Counselor, and the Discovery and Exploration is the Missouri-specific step of the supported employment process, not necessarily customized employment, but the first step of the employment process in the Missouri VR system.
Okay, I can't see the questions, so oops. Dwayne, I can't see the whole question. Because the only questions are still up, I can't see it. Oh, here we go. Okay. So, up a little bit here. Oops. Oh, sure, this is the question you're talking about, but it says, have you had a hard time getting VRCs on board? Ours don't taking too long. Oh, okay, in D&E, which is what you were saying is that first step. I have also heard clients say that they don't come to VR for discovery and exploration, but to find a job. Oh, those are good questions. I think with VR counselors, I think getting them board is with anything. People want to see that it works before you get too much. And I know people are under pressure to be getting jobs. Oftentimes I feel like people always wanted a job yesterday, and it really puts a lot of pressure on employment specialists. So, but I think once people use this process a bit and they see that it works and they see that it saves time overall with job development, that it hasn't been an issue. It is, again, in WIOA, it's a service that VR needs to offer. So it's just something that we all need to look at. And again, it's not for everybody. So if somebody's saying, I really know what to do, and I clear career goal, and that's it. Maybe those are people who might compete well, and maybe who don't need customized employment. Taking that into consideration. But I also say to clients, it's like, if they don't know what they want to do, and a lot of people don't, or in that I'll do anything kind of mode, it makes it really, really hard for the employment specialist. If they're starting with no direction, they've got to be able to narrow it a bit. So I'd encourage people to just, start, and keeping people engaged in the process is really important. So if they're out doing discovery activities with people, with their employment specialist, and if they're part of the informational interviews, it keeps them involved and engaged and not feeling like, nothing's happening. So I don't know if that answered your question well, Tanya, but I think we just got to get out and do it a little and help people see how beneficial it is. Question here, when reading over Wayne's discovery plan, it seems like he had many positive attributes and skills. Can you give an example of someone that you have worked with multiple barriers? Maybe nonverbal, minimal skills, behavior issues. Yeah, certainly lots of people. I mean, Wayne, for those of you who read Wayne has Down syndrome. He's sort of minimally verbal. He probably has more barriers than you might think looking at him. But okay, let me think of somebody. There's a gal I worked with here locally who the theme around horticulture. And she was nonverbal. She definitely had some behavior issues. We couldn't even get her out of the car to go meet the employer. It was very taxing. But we ended up, wanted to work around plants. She liked plants. She liked being around plants. And negotiating a job for her in an herb farm, which was really cool. This is look a little bit different for everybody. Sometimes, getting at the skills is the hard part. For each person, we really have to look at what skills do they have and how can we capitalize on that. How can we exploit those skills? And I use the word exploit in a good way here, that we want to be able to figure out what they can do and use that in some way that makes sense for them, but also makes sense for an employer. Do I see additional questions? Is that, let's go on then. Okay, those questions. Very good. Here's point 5. Everything you want from an informational interview is A, advice, B, information, C, to identify needs of the business industry, or D, all of the above. I'm going to keep talking for a bit as you do that. Stage on the employment profiles, the discovery staging records that you reviewed, the blank one as well as Wayne's. Stage 5 is the descriptive narrative, which this is kind of the pulling it all together part. Doing your notes, information that you gleaned during discovery, you viewing records that already existing records that are there, things, people's files, things that they've done in the past. We tend to not encourage people to look at that stuff too soon, because sometimes what's in records is kind of negative information. And would rather start discovery with kind of a more open mind. At some point, you may want to go look at that. Also, strongest themes and new interests or talents that were revealed. It also summarizes people's ideal conditions of employment. So it's a short narrative that really summarizes what learned and observed without a lot of judgment to it. Let's see if I have an example here. The profile vocational profile or discovery staging record is really meant to contain very positive and useful information. So again, while it's not, it's not just this Pollyanna thing, but discovery should never result in somebody unemployable. What you want to come out of this is what are the conditions that would best fit for this person? What would make them be successful, or to the best that we can figure out, how can we help them be successful in work? So a staging record provides a format for collecting the information. Also is that resource for planning. So it has to focus on possibilities for people. Here's an example, and this is somebody that I really worked with, is that she's a 21-year-old student, and what people told me about him initially, or what I probably would have gained from looking at his records, is very non-compliant, and do something. His immediate response was to say no, no matter what they asked to do. That he was disrespectful to authority figures, particularly the teachers and people who have been working with him, and very poor hygiene. So the information I'm getting from this is, boy, employment outlook is bleak for Shane at best. And I'm the person that's been hired to find a job for him, so I'm thinking, oh, geez, I've got my work cut out for me, don't I? Like, who's going to hire somebody that says no to everything? But in the course of discovery, we learned things about Shane, and it started really with the home visit. And it wasn't a great home visit. It was just Shane and his mom, and Shane kind of sat in the corner the whole time and didn't say anything. And a lot of skills. He was physically very capable of doing lots of things. And all this other information, I wasn't sure where to go with it. During the home visit, his mom was talking a lot, but not really giving me anything that was very useful. Until the end, and he's kind of a bug. Look, tell me about that. She said, well, he goes down to the local Dairy Queen and he picks up their parking lot about once a week. I said, do that? No, sometimes they give him an ice cream cone, but he just likes to do that. And it really flipped my thinking about Shane. So, long story, the way I started thinking about Shane is that he's a 21-year-old job seeker who enjoys working outside, physical work that helps to maintain or improve the environment. He works alone without excessive direction from supervisors or coworkers. He needs a task so that he can work independently and can control the schedule and completion of duties. And when I started looking at Shane in that way, it presented all new possibilities for him. Obviously, kind of get that, I think, wow, self-employment is probably a great option for him. And we'll talk about what happened with Shane at a later date, but I just want to say that when you're in this stage of discovery and wrapping this up, in the right-hand column, that Shane enjoys working outside and doing physical work and, not excessive direction, that's useful information for an employment specialist. All this really deficit-oriented was very useful. It didn't help me on where to go. So that's our job, to kind of be translating that information into information that's great for the employment specialist. And I see Paul here, the majority answered all of the above, that the primary thing you want in informational interviews is advice, information, to identify needs, all the above. And that's correct. We want to look at all of those. Just know that as we go over this, in the discovery part, when we're doing informational interviews, what we're focused on is advice, even all those things. The above is definitely the correct answer. But in discovery, we're most focusing on advice. And I just stress that because you might see that on the post-test. And we'll come back to that when we meet on site as well. And simply to get into job development, we're probably more focused on needs in that stage. But again, you want to be collecting all that information in all of the informational interviews. So once we summarize the information, we've just got a few minutes here, that jumps us into the next step, which is career planning. And how I've done that is through this tool called List of 20. You want to use your team at this point, pull that person's planning team back together, review what you learned in discovery, and use that as a kickoff to the job development. So when I say bring the person's team together, who we started with, the VR counselor, the employment specialist, certainly the job seeker, family members, and people who have been very critical around their team. It's a way to summarize, to kind of, let people know, okay, we're done with discovery, we're going into the next phase, and then using them to help generate some ideas and get ideas from them about who they're connected with and how they might help with job development. So here's what it looks like. Okay, the person's 3 themes that they came up with: horticulture, animals, and crafts and textiles. So in this person's community, and in this case this was my community, I would start thinking about places where other people with similar themes would work. And under horticulture, things like nurseries or farms or orchards, or in my case, hemp farms, Oregon Seed Company, greenhouses, the parks, city parks, the county extension. And we try to get people to actually complete this list, to do the whole 20. I just started with a sample here. The reason that the first 10 are pretty easy to generate. When you get to numbers 10 to 15, it starts getting a little harder. And when you get to 15 to 20, you really start having to stretch a bit. But oftentimes, it's in those later things that come up where people start getting really creative or really thinking outside the box or outside where we would normally go. And that's to places where they tend to be businesses maybe, or tend to be business that not every other job developer has hit up already. So those are the kinds of things we're looking for. You'll see the same thing for animals. Places like pet stores, veterinary clinics, and care places tend to come up fairly quickly. Maybe things like Mulberry Alpaca LLC might not have been at the top of the list when you think of animals. So the further you get down the list, the more creative that they be. You might also start, it may be just out of necessity, kind of coming up with some self-employment ideas. In smaller communities where there aren't a lot of businesses, that to get to 20, you have to really be creative. That's what a list of 20 looks like. As we start fleeing them from discovery and moving into job development, it's sometimes a little blurry. That's kind of represented by these circles over here. Because at the end of discovery, you are trying to, finalize the themes. You're doing some informational interviews. You might even be doing some short work trials or discovery activities that look like short work trials. And you might get some job offers. In Wayne's example, he got a job offer while still in discovery. That's not that untypical. And you might have to say, no, we're not ready to go there yet. In case it was kind of good because the employer kind of said, why don't you think about this for a couple of weeks, and if still interested in a couple of weeks, come back and talk to me, which gave us a little time. But generally, you're moving to job development when the discovery staging record is completed. You've identified the 3 themes, identified ideal conditions for employment, and now the list of 20 is the career plan. So that list of 20 really gives you a list of 60, and maybe you never contact all 60 of those sites, but you can use it to kind of prioritize what are the most interesting ones and ones where you think you'll have most success. It helps kick off into job development, and you can just use that list to different businesses and talk to them, and everyone you talk to is probably going to lead you in another direction, which is good. That's what we want. We want to help you get out there and get behind the scenes. So I'm just going to wrap this up by saying this is a process that you really have to plan for. My friend Madonna always says, plan your work and work your plan. And it is so true with discovery, is that you've got to really make sure that things are scheduled and completed and that you move through the process. And discovery staging record can help you do that. I'm going to skip to see if there's any last questions. I'll check the Q&A here. Time. Dwayne, is there anything that you need to add in wrapping up and thinking about next steps? Or?
Yes, I will be sending out this afternoon the registration link for next Friday's webinar. Again, I would encourage individuals to complete the survey that pops up when you exit out of this window session. In our last webinar, we actually had about 25 fewer people complete the survey. The surveys have been 80 to 90% rating is favorable, but we want to ensure we're catching everybody's response. So again, if you would, please complete the survey upon exiting. In addition to being emailed the registration link for next week's webinar, this afternoon I'll also email out to everyone the locations for the on-site training. St. Louis will be on Tuesday, June 5th. Jefferson City is on Wednesday, June 6th. And there will be a training in Kansas City on Thursday, June 7th. What we've decided to do is just allow the sites to be open to allow individuals to attend whichever site would be preferred. So we will not actually be assigning you to a site. So when we send out, it's each of the attendees' choice on which location they would like to attend. If there are questions about that, you can feel free to email me once you get the email this afternoon, site locations. And we do have one more question. Again, earlier, I think I answered, but it may have been a little garbled on where to submit our homework and reflections on readings. At this point in time, there's really nowhere to submit those to. We just ask that individuals are doing that so they have a greater understanding of the content. If you do have specific questions about the homework or specific reflections that you would like to share, you're always welcome to post those in the Q&A box. And if it is a situation where you would like to actually ask it verbally, we can always go in and unmute individual phone lines also. And so otherwise, just keep completing those assignments and don't worry about actually formally submitting those. And we'll wait and see if there's any other questions or answers. If there's other questions. And I don't know, Janet, if you have anything else to wrap up with.
Thank you for participating, and we really do appreciate your feedback. If you wouldn't mind, filling out the evaluation, we appreciate that. Just so you know, when we have the on-site training, we'll have a lot more opportunity for discussion and to practice with some of these things, some activities that will do that. So thank you, and I'll talk to you next week.